For 2,500 years, the Galactic Council kept the peace. Countless species coexisted under a shared understanding. War was a relic of the past. They created a golden age where treaties replaced weapons and discussion settled disputes. Hundreds of planets, thousands of cultures, all bound by a simple rule: resolve differences without bloodshed. Humanity had been part of this council for centuries, known for diplomacy and patience. Humans were respected, though seen as unremarkable compared to species with longer histories and advanced powers. Humans brought a steadying presence and knack for cooperation. They often played the role of mediator in disputes, helping keep the fragile unity intact. While they lacked the physical might or the psychic abilities of other species, their skill in negotiation was undeniable. Other species often joked about humanity's soft heart and their constant eagerness for peace. But tensions had been simmering for some time. The Xylar Dominion, a faction famous for its hunger for territory and resources, started to stretch the limits of the Council's laws, known for their ruthless expansion tactics. The Xylar rarely showed respect for boundaries, frequently testing the patience of neighboring systems. The Council mostly looked the other way, handling each complaint about the Dominion's encroachments with mild reprimands and more diplomacy. For the Council, peace was sacred, and they couldn't imagine any species willing to break it. Then the Dominion's gaze turned toward human colonies. It began with subtle provocations, small skirmishes near the edges of human spaceships accidentally crossing into human sectors. Supply routes mistakenly disrupted. At first, humanity tried to ignore these provocations, hoping they were simple misunderstandings. But the incidents grew bolder. Xylar ships began to interfere openly with human trade vessels, cutting off critical supplies and harassing unarmed transports. When humans reached out to the Council, they expected support. Instead, they received polite reassurances and little else. The Council maintained that the incidents were unfortunate but not severe enough to warrant intervention. They suggested that humanity should exercise patience, reminding them that maintaining the peace often meant enduring minor inconveniences. To most Council members, these were nothing more than unfortunate misunderstandings, not signs of a deeper threat. They assumed humans would continue to tolerate these disruptions, just as other species had done in the past. Within humanity, frustration grew. Colonists and traders, once loyal to the ideals of peace, began to question their leaders. They felt abandoned, wondering why their safety seemed less important than maintaining harmony. In a distant Council chamber, reports of the Dominion's actions spread quickly, fueling anger. Earth and its colonies grew restless, their trust in the Council's ability to protect them waning. Humanity had kept its promise to uphold peace for generations, but now that peace felt like a burden, a set of chains binding them. While others took advantage, human diplomats continued to appeal to the Council, hoping that one last plea would bring a solution. They pointed out that ignoring these actions would only embolden them Dominion, making them a danger not just to humans, but to everyone. But the response was the same: calm assurances, gentle reprimands, and reminders of the Council's long-standing traditions. Many Council members couldn't understand why humans were so agitated. To them, humans were overreacting, perhaps too quick to view every action as a threat. In reality, many Council members had grown complacent for so long. They had relied on treaties and promises, becoming blind to any real danger. The very concept of a war was unimaginable to them, especially involving humans. They couldn't fathom that a species known for its patience and diplomacy might finally reach a breaking point. To the Council, humanity's frustration was just noise, a passing storm that would settle on its own. The Xylar too watched humanity's response with smug satisfaction. They saw humans as weak, predictable, bound by a moral code that prevented them from responding aggressively. The Dominion considered this restraint foolish and outdated. To them, strength was the only language that mattered, and they believed humanity would never dare to speak it. Confident in this belief, the Dominion continued its provocations, convinced that no real consequences would follow. But within the halls of Earth's governing body, discussions were shifting. Human leaders were torn. On one side were those who still believed in the Council's vision, who argued that patience and diplomacy could eventually yield a solution. On the other were those who had seen enough, who felt that the time had come to protect their own, even if it meant going against the Council's ideals. In hushed tones, they began to discuss options that hadn't been considered for generations. For the first time in centuries, humanity faced a choice: remain bound to the Council's principles, or take a stand and risk everything to defend their people. The Xylar Dominion's next move shed any illusions of restraint. Their forces launched a full-scale attack on a major human outpost, not far from Earth's core territories. They hid without warning, wiping out defenses and causing destruction on an unimaginable scale. Entire communities were lost in moments, and the survivors faced devastation. Scarred by the brutality they'd witnessed for centuries, humans had embraced peace. But this attack was something no one could ignore. It was clear the Dominion wanted to send a message showing their might and testing humanity's limits. The response across human territories was immediate and unified. News of the attack spread like wildfire, igniting anger and a call for action that hadn't been heard in generations. Earth and its colonies had always rallied behind peace, but this was a direct assault on their people, and undeniable provocation. Leaders faced demands from citizens, traders, and families of the lost, all urging them to take a stand. This wasn't just about territory, it was about their lives and the values they believed in for so long. They were tired of waiting, tired of turning the other cheek. While their own suffered, human representatives went straight to the council, hoping for a change, expecting that this time the attack scale would force action. They presented evidence, data, and personal stories from the survivors, painting a clear picture of the horror unleashed by the Dominion. They laid bare the fear and anger simmering within their population, warning that people wouldn't tolerate much more. But the response from the council remained the same. The council members listened, offered their sympathies, and suggested negotiations with the Xylar Dominion. They viewed the incident as a tragedy, but refused to acknowledge it as an act of war, choosing instead to treat it as a misunderstanding that could be resolved through further talks. Frustration and disbelief swept through humanity's ranks. This was beyond patience. This was a failure to protect their own. While the council saw the attack as a minor incident, humans saw it as a brutal display of power aimed at them for the first time. They felt truly alone, realizing that the council's ideal of peace didn't extend to protecting their people. They were left wondering if the council cared more about maintaining the illusion of harmony than addressing real threats behind closed doors. Human leaders met to discuss their options. They were torn between their loyalty to the council's principles and the duty to defend their own. Some argued that they should continue pushing for change, with the council believing that diplomacy might still hold the solution. Others, however, had grown weary of waiting and saw the council's inaction as a betrayal. They felt that humanity had done its part, that they'd followed the council's rules, trusted its promises, but now found themselves vulnerable and exposed. As the debate raged, the situation only grew tenser. Reports indicated that the Xylar Dominion was preparing for further incursions, expanding its reach into human territories with no signs of slowing down. The Dominion's leaders remained confident, convinced that humanity would back down, that they would never defy the council's mandates. To them, humans were bound by their own principles too, shackled by ideals to respond with force. The Dominion saw this restraint as weakness and opening. They were all too willing to exploit. The pressure on human leaders was immense. They faced an unprecedented choice: stand by and hope for intervention that might never come, or risk everything to protect their people. It became clear that appealing to the council was futile. They'd exhausted every diplomatic channel, every option within the established rules. The council, once a symbol of unity, had become an obstacle, leading them with few paths forward. At last, humanity's leaders made their decision. They understood the weight of what they were choosing, knew that breaking a 2,500-year-old peace would send shockwaves across the galaxy. But they also knew they couldn't stand by and watch their people suffer. They prepared for an action that hadn't been taken in millennia. A declaration of war. The announcement was delivered in every corner of the galaxy, breaking through the usual diplomatic channels with a message no one could ignore. Humanity had officially declared war on the Xylar Dominion. For most in the Galactic Council, this was unthinkable. Humanity, known for diplomacy and peaceful resolutions, had broken the Council's ancient peace species that had only ever seen humans as mediators. Diplomats and traders found themselves stunned. They struggled to process this shift, trying to reconcile the humans they knew with a species willing to fight. The Council was paralyzed with disbelief, accustomed to the idea that humanity would always take the path of least resistance. They were slow to respond. Members who had often disregarded humanity's concerns now began to wonder if they underestimated them. Whispers and debates filled council halls as species from across the galaxy speculated about what had driven humans to this point. Many struggled to believe that humans could have the means to wage any significant war, assuming they lacked the military might to take on a force like the Xylar Dominion. The Xylar Dominion's response came swiftly, echoing their earlier arrogance. They publicly dismissed humanity's declaration, framing it as a desperate futile gesture in their eyes. Humans were naive, bound by outdated principles, weak in the face of real power. The Dominion mocked the very idea that humans could pose a threat, projecting confidence in their superiority. Their leaders made bold statements declaring that humanity would soon learn the cost of its defiance. They assured the galaxy that the human threat would be neutralized swiftly, making an example out of them to dissuade others from attempting the same. But humanity had anticipated this reaction. They had spent months preparing in silence, using every resource and technology they'd kept hidden. Advanced fleets long held secrets in stealth and defense, now mobilized under a single command. Humanity had quietly developed weaponry that combined centuries of research and innovation. They'd adapted their strengths, creating technology suited to their unique approach to conflict. While other species relied on brute force or overwhelming numbers, humanity had focused on precision, strategy, and resilience. The galaxy watched with growing tension as human forces began to move. Fleets that had never left their home territories suddenly surged forward with purpose and coordination. People across the galaxy who once seen humanity as harmless started to wonder just how much they misunderstood this peaceful species. The Xylar Dominion continued to scoff, convinced that humanity's efforts were little more than a show. But as human ships closed in on Exer borders, something shifted in the tone of galactic discourse. The council met in emergency sessions, debating how to respond to the situation spiraling out of their control. Some members argued for intervention, suggesting that the council should force humanity and the Dominion back to the negotiating table. Others, wary of the Dominion's unchecked expansion, felt that humanity's actions were justified. For the first time, long-standing allies of the Dominion questioned their allegiance, uncertain if they wanted to stand against the species they had previously underestimated. The initial human strikes were precise, targeting strategic outposts and supply lines. Unlike traditional warfare, humanity's approach relied on calculated, devastating blows that left the Exilo reeling. Humanity struck hard and fast, demonstrating a level of sophistication and tactical skill that took the Dominion by surprise. The Xylar, accustomed to straightforward shows of power, found themselves scrambling to adapt. The first reports of human victories spread quickly, shocking council members who had expected humanity to crumble at the first sign of resistance. As news of the human victories reached the council, other species began reevaluating their perception of humanity. The image of humans as merely diplomatic and cooperative began to fade, replaced by a new understanding of their resilience and capability. Council members who had once dismissed humanity now found themselves facing a difficult truth. They had underestimated them, mistaking their patience for weakness. Humanity's message was clear: they would defend themselves with or without the council's support. Within the council, opinions grew increasingly divided. Some members wanted to distance themselves from the conflict, unwilling to risk involvement. Others viewed humanity's actions with a mix of respect and caution, sensing a shift in the balance of power that could redefine the council's future. Even longtime allies of the Dominion began to question their loyalty, recognizing that the Dominion's unchecked aggression had ignited a force far more determined than they had anticipated. The Xylar Dominion, meanwhile, struggled to maintain its pattern. Their confidence began to waver as they faced losses they hadn't expected. Humanity's strategic strikes exposed vulnerabilities the Dominion hadn't considered. For the first time, they had to acknowledge that humans were not the easy prey they had assumed. Their arrogance had blinded them, leaving them unprepared for an opponent who fought not for conquest, but for survival and justice. Humanity's declaration had started as a defiant message to the Dominion, but it had become something more. Statement to the entire galaxy. In choosing to fight, humans showed they valued peace but wouldn't tolerate exploitation. They revealed the strength rooted in their willingness to protect what mattered, even at great cost. This was a side of humanity the council had never seen before, a side that commanded respect and instilled fear. The galaxy, once united under a banner of peace, now faced a future shaped by humanity's resolve. The council, shocked and uncertain, watched as humanity redefined its place among the stars. The first strikes from humanity were not random or reckless. Every move was planned targeting key Xylar positions with precise calculated force. While the Xylar Dominion had expected a chaotic response, they faced an organized assault that disrupted their carefully constructed network. Humanity's fleets didn't launch a traditional invasion. Instead, they executed pinpoint attacks on strategic facilities, supply depot, and communication lines. In one sweep, humanity began dismantling the Dominion's operations from within, exploiting every weakness they had identified. In silent dominance over years of observation, the Xylar Dominion, known for its brute force, was unprepared for the kind of warfare humanity unleashed. They were accustomed to intimidation and overpowering smaller, less organized foes, but humanity was either unprepared nor weak. They demonstrated advanced tactics and strategy, showing a thorough understanding of the Dominion's military structure. Every strike threw the Xylar into confusion, and their forces struggled to regroup as humanity dismantled critical outposts and supply routes that the Dominion had believed untouchable. Word of humanity's success spread first in whispers, then in bold proclamations. Other species, many of whom had quietly suffered under the Xylar Dominion's pressure, watched with surprise and growing interest. Humanity had become a symbol showing others what was possible. For too long, many had accepted the Dominion's power as a fact of life, but now humans, once seen as peaceful, even passive, were openly challenging a force that had ruled through fear. As humanity continued its campaign, they revealed technologies that had been long hidden from the galaxy. While other species had focused on direct combat power, humanity had invested in precision tools, technology, IES, that allowed them to maximize impact with minimal resources. They demonstrated stealth capabilities that allowed ships to move undetected, strategic weapons that disabled rather than destroyed, and shielding technology that could withstand the Dominion's attacks. That Xylar, used to their own overwhelming firepower, found their weapons ineffective against human defenses. Forced to reevaluate their entire approach in response, the Xylar Dominion tried to rally its forces, sending reinforcements to locations and attempting to establish defensive positions. But humanity adapted swiftly, using tactics that made even these reinforcements vulnerable. Rather than relying on numbers, humans focused on agility, hitting swiftly and then retreating before the Dominion could organize a counterattack. The Dominion's traditional tactics, which relied on strength and numbers and fear, proved ineffective. They were accustomed to overwhelming their enemies. Facing an opponent who fought smart rather than hard left them at a loss. The Dominion began to feel pressure unlike anything they'd experienced. Their borders, once considered secure, were now vulnerable, and their hold over occupied territories weakened. Every victory for humanity was a direct blow to the Dominion's reputation, and the Xylar leaders began to realize that they had underestimated humanity's capability and resolve. For the first time, the Dominion was forced to fight defensive war. This shift in roles unsettled them, and their leaders scrambled to understand how humans had become a serious threat seemingly overnight. As the battles continued, humanity gained allies. Other species, previously silent out of fear or indifference, started to provide information and resources in quiet support. Some even offered to join humanity's fight, inspired by their courage. The galaxy's perception of humanity continued to evolve. They were no longer just diplomats or traitors, but warriors with the cause. The Council watched with growing unease, aware that humanity's rise in power could lead to a change in the galaxy's balance. The longer humanity's campaign continued, the clearer it became that they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to reclaim control over their future. The Xylar Dominion's confidence began to crumble. Their propaganda, which had once mocked humanity's efforts, was now laced with doubt and fear. Reports of Xylar defeats circulated, spreading a sense of panic among the Dominion's own people. The Dominion's leaders, who had once dismissed humanity as an insignificant threat, found themselves facing the possibility of losing territory and influence. They had failed to understand that humanity's strength wasn't in sheer power, but in their unyielding determination and adaptability. For humanity, the fight was about more than victory. It was about sending a message. They wanted the galaxy to understand that they valued peace, but wouldn't tolerate aggression or exploitation. Every strike they delivered against the Exio was a reminder that their patience had limits. Humanity's actions weren't driven by conquest or greed. They were fueled by a need for justice to prove that even the most peace-loving species would stand up. When pushed too far, each Sylar defeat further destabilized the Dominion, and the once feared empire found itself scrambling to regroup. They had always assumed that their reputation alone was enough to deter any meaningful opposition, but humanity had shattered that illusion. The Dominion, facing a relentless opponent that didn't rely on fear, was losing its grip on power. Humanity's tactics continued to evolve, each one designed to exploit the Dominion's vulnerabilities, and the Exiler were left to react, struggling to keep up with the relentless pace of human advances. As humanity pressed forward, they knew the risks. They had chosen this path knowing it would mean a fight that could last years, perhaps even decades, but they were undeterred. The galaxy, once unified under a peaceful council, was now watching as humanity redefined what it meant to defend oneself. Each victory, each strike sent a clear message across the stars: humanity would not be underestimated again. The war shifted quickly in humanity's favor. With each calculated strike, they forced the Xylar Dominion to retreat, pushing them out of territories they had once dominated. What started as targeted attacks had grown into a full-scale retreat for the Dominion, a collapse of power they hadn't anticipated. Humanity's determination and refusal to yield had shattered the Dominion's aura of invincibility, leaving them scrambling to maintain control over even their core territories. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the once mighty Xylar Dominion struggled to regroup. Humanity's finally victories came as swift, decisive blows, crippling the Dominion's command structure and disbanding their last defensive efforts. With their forces scattered and resources drained, the Dominion was left with no choice but to surrender. Humanity's declaration had not been empty words. It had carried weight, backed by a relentless pursuit of justice and protection for their own. This was more than just a victory. It was a turning point. The galaxy now understood the resolve and strength humanity had kept her for so long. The Galactic Council's response to humanity's success was mixed, torn between shock and a newfound respect. Humanity had accomplished something no species had dared to attempt. They had stood up to the most feared faction in the galaxy and emerged victorious. The Council, which had long underestimated humanity's capabilities, found themselves grappling with the implications of this shift. For the first time, humanity's position in the galaxy had changed. They were no longer seen as passive or weak. They were recognized as a force capable of defending themselves with unprecedented skill and tenacity. As the dust settled, humanity addressed the Council once more, reaffirming their commitment to peace, but making it clear that they would not hesitate to defend their people again if necessary. Their message was simple: peace was their preference, but not at the cost of their security. The Council, recognizing the power and clarity of this stance, found themselves reassessing their own approach to conflict resolution. Humanity's actions had shown that diplomacy alone could not always ensure safety. The Council realized they could no longer ignore threats or rely solely on treaties to maintain order. Across the galaxy, other species took note of humanity's example. Many had silently suffered under the Dominion control, accepting oppression in the name of peace. But humanity had proven that peace was not simply the absence of war, it was the presence of justice and protection for one's own. Inspired by humanity's stand, other species began questioning their place within the Council and whether they too could push back against oppression. Humanity's fight had become a catalyst, sparking a ripple effect that would lead to a reevaluation of power dynamics throughout the galaxy. In the aftermath, the Council was forced to reconsider its policies. Humanity's actions had highlighted the flaws in a system that prioritized peace over the well-being of its members. Some Council members proposed reforms to address these issues, suggesting stronger measures to prevent unchecked aggression and protect vulnerable species. Humanity's example had revealed that the galaxy's long-standing peace was fragile, maintained only by overlooking threats and silencing the concerns of those affected. Now, with the Dominion's influence shattered, the Council faced pressure to change. For humanity, the victory marked both a triumph and a new chapter. They had defended their own, proving their strength and resilience to a galaxy that had underestimated them for centuries. But they also understood that this power came with responsibility. The galaxy's perception of humanity had shifted, and with it came new challenges and expectations. Humanity had shown they could be fierce protectors, and now other species looked to them as a potential ally in times of crisis. They were no longer seen as bystanders in the galaxy's politics, they were active participants ready to stand up for what they believed in. Humanity's war with the Dominion ended, but its impact would last far longer. Their victory had sent a clear message to all: they value peace. But they would not be taken advantage of. This resolve earned them a level of respect and caution from others, a recognition of their willingness to act when pushed. Humanity's stand had reshaped the Council, forcing it to confront its flaws and reconsider its role. The Council, once certain of its authority, now understood that it could no longer afford to ignore the voices of its members or dismiss threats as minor inconveniences. In the end, humanity returned to their peaceful pursuits. But the galaxy would never forget the events that had unfolded. They had transformed not into conquerors, but into protectors willing to defend their rights and values. The Council, now faced with a more assertive humanity, acknowledged that peace would require more than treaties. It would demand respect for the needs and security of all its members. Humanity's journey from patient diplomats to powerful defenders had reshaped the galaxy, leaving an enduring legacy that would influence its future for generations to come.